What if your last wish could change your fate forever? Michael Reed stared at the cold, gray wall of his cell, his hands clenched into tight fists. The countdown was ticking louder than any clock, 3 days until his execution. 3 days until everything would end. He had long since stopped hoping for a miracle. Prison life had crushed that part of him years ago. But then, something happened that no one expected. An envelope, marked with the unmistakable logo of SpaceX, slid under his cell door. Inside, a letter with one sentence that changed everything. You have been selected to participate in a Final Wish program hosted by Elon Musk. Michael's mind raced. Was it a cruel joke? Another trick to keep him distracted? He unfolded the letter again, trying to find a catch. But no, clear instructions followed. A chance to make one final wish, a wish that could alter the course of his life. His heart hammered against his ribs. Could this be real? Could Elon Musk, billionaire, innovator, man who dared to dream of colonizing Mars, actually be giving him a chance? Michael hadn't felt hope in years. He was a man whose world had shrunk to 4 concrete walls and iron bars. The only sounds were the echoing footsteps of guards and the occasional clatter of a prison door. He had long accepted his fate, a death sentence for a crime he said he didn't commit. But now, everything was different. The letter was clear. One final wish. One chance to change your story. He read it again, eyes wide, the words blurring as tears welled up. What would he wish for? Freedom? Revenge? Redemption? Before he could answer, his thoughts were interrupted by the loudspeaker crackling to life. Read, Michael. Report to the warden's office immediately. Michael's pulse quickened. What was going on? Was this some elaborate setup? As he was escorted down the cold, sterile halls, every eye seemed to be on him, other inmates whispering, guards exchanging looks. Something big was happening. The warden's office was unusually crowded. Cameras, reporters, and lawyers crowded the room, buzzing with energy. Michael felt like an exhibit on display. And then, in walked the man himself, Elon Musk. Not the distant, untouchable billionaire Michael had only seen on TV, but a real man, calm, confident, with a gaze that seemed to pierce through the room. Elon Musk, the warden announced. He's here to oversee the Final Wish program. Michael swallowed hard. Elon looked directly at him. Michael, I know your time is limited. This program is about hope, about pushing boundaries, even for those who society has given up on. You have one last chance to tell us what you want. Michael's throat was dry. The room felt like it was spinning. For the first time in years, he felt the flicker of something he thought was gone forever, hope. The next few hours were a blur. Michael met with psychologists, legal advisors, and media personnel. They explained the program, a national initiative launched by Elon Musk, aiming to give death row inmates a chance to express a final wish, anything at all. Some wishes would be simple, a final meal, a call to a loved one. Others, like Michael's, were more complicated. Elon's team was interested in more than just words. They wanted to explore the human spirit, the power of technology to transform lives, even those on the edge of death. Michael was told he would have to present his wish in front of a panel and justify why it mattered, not just to him, but to society. That night, alone in his cell, Michael stared at the ceiling. The old shadows of despair clawed at his mind, but beneath them, a new light glimmered. What could he ask for? What would really change his fate? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from, the letter had said. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Michael whispered the words to himself, as if talking to a stranger. What pushes me forward? It was a question he hadn't dared to ask himself in a long time. Memories flooded back. His little sister, Jessica, the one person who never gave up on him. The cold nights alone, the fights, the loss, the pain. The crime he was convicted of, still a mystery he couldn't shake. Could his wish be for her? For forgiveness? For truth? He felt a fire ignite deep inside him, a determination born not of desperation, but of something stronger, the will to fight for his story to be heard. But there was also fear. Fear that this was all a final test, a way to humiliate him before the end. Could Elon Musk, a man from a world so far removed from prison walls, really care about someone like him? Or was this just another moment in a long line of broken promises? As Michael lay down that night, he made a silent vow. If this is my last chance, I'm going to make it count. He didn't know how. He didn't know if it would work. But for the first time in years, he dared to dream. What would you wish for if you had only days left to live? Michael Reed wasn't born to be a prisoner. He wasn't born to be a headline, a cautionary tale, or a number on death row. But life has a way of twisting the simplest hopes into tangled knots, and for Michael, those knots started forming early. Growing up in a small Texas town called Cedar Creek, Michael was just like any other kid chasing dreams bigger than his surroundings. But Cedar Creek was a place where dreams often came to die. Poverty clung to the cracked sidewalks like stubborn weeds, and opportunity was something you heard about on TV, not something you touched. His father left when Michael was just 6. One day, his mother whispered hurriedly, "He's gone. He's not coming back." She didn't cry. She barely looked at him. It was as if she had already stopped hoping for anything better. That night, Michael lay awake on the threadbare mattress in his shared bedroom, the silence louder than the wind outside. His father's empty chair at the kitchen table seemed to swallow the whole house. For a child, abandonment is a hollow ache that never really leaves you. His mother, Linda, struggled. She was kind but lost, drowning in addiction to numb the pain of her own failures. Some nights, she was barely there. Others, she screamed. Michael learned to be invisible, to slip quietly through the house and take care of his little sister, Jessica. Jessica was 7 years younger than Michael, and in many ways, she was the only light he had. Her laughter could fill the whole house, breaking through the shadows. But even she couldn't erase the loneliness that settled deep in Michael's bones. School was no refuge. Teachers saw him as just another, troubled kid, disruptive, distant, and angry. Friends were scarce. When you come from a broken home, the world doesn't always wait to be kind. By the time Michael was 10, he was already fighting to survive. The streets offered a harsh education. He learned quickly how to defend himself, how to make choices that felt like survival rather than rebellion. One cold autumn day, Michael and his friend Jace got into a fight with a local gang. Michael still remembers the sound of broken glass and sirens, the panic in his mother's eyes when she found out. That was the moment things started to spiral. At 13, Michael was arrested for petty theft. It was a slap on the wrist, but it set the tone. The system saw him as a statistic, not a boy lost in a world too cruel for him to navigate alone. His relationship with Jessica became the only thing keeping him grounded. Whenever the walls closed in, he thought of her. He promised himself that one day, he would make it right, for both of them. But life had other plans. At 17, Michael was involved in a robbery that went terribly wrong. He maintains that he didn't pull the trigger, but the law didn't see it that way. The victim died, and Michael was convicted of murder. Sitting in the courtroom during his trial, Michael felt like a ghost. His lawyer was young and overworked, witnesses were unreliable, the prosecution's narrative was strong. His past was weaponized against him. The judge handed down the sentence, death. That day, Michael's world shattered completely. His last visit with Jessica before he was taken to death row was filled with tears and whispered promises. "Don't forget me," Jessica begged. "I'll come back," he said, though he didn't know if it was true. The years on death row were brutal. Isolation became a constant companion. Michael watched friends fade away one by one, some executed, some broken beyond repair. The fear of death was nothing compared to the fear of being forgotten. Yet, even in the darkest nights, memories of Jessica's smile gave him strength. She was his reason to fight, his anchor in the storm. But Michael's story wasn't just about pain and loss. It was also about the small moments of humanity that managed to shine through. Like the time a guard named Daniels, who Michael thought hated him, slipped him a book about space exploration. "It's never too late to dream," Daniels said quietly. That book sparked a fascination with the stars, a symbol of hope beyond the prison walls. Or the letters he secretly wrote to Jessica, though he knew they might never be read. Those letters were his way of holding on to the person he used to be. Michael's past was a tangled mix of mistakes, missed chances, and heartbreak, but it was also a testament to resilience. He wasn't just a condemned man, he was a brother, a son, a dreamer crushed by circumstance but still holding on. As he prepared to face Elon Musk's Final Wish program, Michael thought back on those years. The question wasn't just about what he wanted to ask for. It was about what he deserved. Could a man like him, branded by the system and society, really have a chance at redemption? Or was this just another illusion, a fleeting hope before the final curtain? His story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. So, what pushes you forward when the world is against you? For Michael, it was the memory of a little sister's love, a guard's unexpected kindness, and a dream of the stars beyond his cell. Because in a story like Michael's, every voice matters. Michael never imagined that hope could bring new challenges, but as the Final Wish program gained attention, the tension around him mounted. What started as a flicker of possibility quickly became a storm of conflicts, within the prison, inside his own heart, and in the world outside. The morning after Elon Musk's visit, the prison buzzed like never before. Guards whispered in the hallways, inmates exchanged rumors, and journalists camped near the gates, eager for a scoop on the death row inmate with a mysterious final wish. Michael was both at the center and the edge of this chaos. For years, he had lived in silence. Now, the spotlight burned brightly, exposing old wounds and new dangers. His fellow inmates reacted with a mix of disbelief and resentment. Some called him a traitor, snitching by cooperating with outsiders. Others were simply jealous that Michael might get a break while they faced certain death. One afternoon, as Michael walked back from the cafeteria, he felt eyes boring into his back. A group of inmates cornered him. "What's the deal with Musk's game, Reed?" sneered a tall man named Carter. "You think he's gonna save you? Or just use you for show?" Michael kept his voice steady. "I don't know. But it's the only chance I've got." Carter's laughter was cold. "Chance? Don't forget where you are. Hope won't keep you alive here." The confrontation ended without violence, but Michael knew tensions were rising. Every step he took was watched, every word twisted. Meanwhile, outside the prison, the media frenzy was in full swing. Headlines varied from sympathetic to sensational. Death row miracle. Elon Musk's Final Wish program sparks debate. Convicted killer or victim of the system? The Michael Reed story. Elon Musk's controversial experiment, playing God with lives on death row. Michael watched it all from his cell, the distant noise a reminder that his story had exploded beyond the prison walls. But the rising conflict wasn't just external. Inside, Michael wrestled with his own doubts and fears. The pressure to decide on his wish was immense. Elon's team wanted specifics, something bold, something that could resonate with the public and inspire change. But what if his wish was too small? Or too big? What if the truth he wanted to reveal, his innocence, the failures of the justice system, was ignored? What if this was just a staged spectacle? Michael's only real support came from Jessica. Though separated by miles and barred from visiting, they exchanged letters whenever possible. Her words were a lifeline. "Don't let them break you," she wrote in one letter. "This is your moment to show the world who you really are." Her unwavering belief in him was the flicker of light in the growing storm. One evening, Michael was called to a private meeting with Warden Mills. The warden was a man hardened by years in corrections, but there was a flicker of respect in his eyes when he spoke to Michael. "Read this program, it's bigger than you or me," Mills said quietly. "You have a chance, but be careful. There are people inside and outside who want this to fail." Michael nodded. "I'm ready to face whatever comes." Mills gave a rare, thin smile. "Good. Just don't lose yourself in the process." But losing himself seemed inevitable. The conflicting emotions tore at Michael, hope battling despair, courage wrestling with fear. As he prepared his presentation for the panel, memories of the crime haunted him. He remembered the night in agonizing detail, the chaos, the gunshot, the screams. He still insisted he was innocent. He believed the truth was out there, buried beneath lies and assumptions. Yet, would anyone listen? Just days before his presentation, Michael received a chilling message from an unknown source slipped under his door. "Stop this charade or pay the price." The warning shook him to the core. The prison was no place for second chances, especially not for someone trying to challenge the system. That same night, he found his cell window smashed, likely a threat from hostile inmates or guards trying to intimidate him. But Michael refused to back down. The Final Wish program panel was scheduled for the following week. Elon Musk himself would attend. Michael's wish would be his last stand. On the morning of the panel, Michael's heart was pounding. He wasn't just fighting for freedom. He was fighting for his dignity, for justice, for the chance to rewrite a life deemed lost. As he stepped into the bright room filled with cameras and onlookers, Michael felt the weight of every eye on him. The air was thick with tension, the clash of hope and hostility, the pressure of expectation, and the lingering threat of violence. He took a deep breath, looked directly at Elon Musk, and began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael's voice was steady, but filled with emotion, "I am not here just to make a wish. I'm here to tell my story, a story of mistakes, pain, and the hope that truth will set me free." He paused, eyes scanning the room. "I ask for a chance. A chance to prove my innocence. To reopen my case with the resources only this program can provide. I want the truth to come to light, not just for me, but for everyone who has been forgotten by the system." The room fell silent. Elon Musk nodded slowly, a spark of respect in his eyes. "Michael, your wish is bold. It challenges us all." And so, the rising conflict reached a boiling point. Michael's wish was not just a plea for his life, but a confrontation with the very system that condemned him. Would the truth finally emerge? Or would the shadows of the past swallow him whole? What would you do if your final wish was to challenge a broken system? Hit subscribe and leave a comment. Because Michael's fight has only just begun. The day Michael Reed's wish was accepted marked the beginning of a journey none could have predicted, a journey that would take him far beyond the cold walls of death row and deep into the heart of a battle for truth, justice, and redemption. After the panel, Elon Musk personally assured Michael that his case would be reviewed by a special task force comprised of top lawyers, forensic experts, and investigators. This was no ordinary appeal, it was a full-scale mission to uncover facts buried under years of neglect and misjudgment. For Michael, it was the first time in nearly 2 decades that he truly felt a spark of hope. The prison's cold, harsh routine faded into the background as Michael was moved to a different facility, one designed for inmates involved in special programs. The change was stark. His new cell was brighter, less confining, a subtle reminder that this was different. More importantly, he was given access to legal counsel, forensic scientists, and communication devices that allowed limited contact with the outside world. Suddenly, Michael's world was expanding, but so were the stakes. The first meeting with the legal team was overwhelming. Sarah Mitchell, a determined public defender known for fighting wrongful convictions, led the group. She sat across from Michael, her eyes sharp but kind. "We're here to help, Michael," she said firmly. But this will be a difficult road. The system isn't designed to admit mistakes easily. Michael nodded. He already knew that. He had spent years fighting alone, but now he wasn't just a prisoner, he was a man on a mission. The investigation uncovered cracks in the original case. Witness statements had been inconsistent, forensic evidence mishandled, and most importantly, a key piece of evidence, the murder weapon, had never been tested with the technology available today. Each new revelation felt like a step closer to freedom, but also brought new challenges. Meanwhile, the media frenzy intensified. Documentaries aired nightly, social media exploded with support and skepticism alike. Michael found himself at the center of a nationwide debate about justice, race, and the power of technology to change lives. Supporters called him a symbol of hope. Critics labeled him a manipulative criminal exploiting celebrity interest. Michael's relationship with Jessica remained a source of strength. They spoke over rare phone calls, her voice steady and unwavering. "Dad always said justice was blind," Jessica said one evening. "Maybe now, with everything on the line, it will finally open its eyes." As weeks turned into months, Michael was thrust into a whirlwind of legal battles, media appearances, and emotional highs and lows. He endured interrogations that questioned his every word, public scrutiny that felt invasive, and the haunting memories of that fateful night. Yet, he also experienced moments of kindness and humanity that reminded him of who he was beneath the labels. One day, the team arranged for Michael to visit the crime scene, a small, run-down apartment in Houston where the murder occurred. Standing there, Michael's heart ached. The room looked nothing like it had 2 decades ago, but the pain was fresh. He walked slowly, retracing steps, trying to find the truth in the shadows. During the visit, Sarah pulled him aside. "There's something you need to know," she said quietly. The forensic team had discovered DNA on the murder weapon, DNA that didn't belong to Michael. The revelation shook the case wide open. As evidence mounted, the pressure mounted too. Powerful forces within the legal system resisted reopening the case. Judges delayed hearings, prosecutors pushed back, and rumors of intimidation surfaced. Michael knew this was more than just a legal battle. It was a fight against a system unwilling to admit fault. Amid this chaos, Elon Musk remained a steady presence. He used his platform to amplify Michael's story, calling for transparency and justice. In a televised interview, Elon said, "Technology and compassion can change lives." Michael's story is proof that even those society has written off deserve a chance. But Michael's journey was far from easy. One night, after a tense hearing, Michael received a visit from a mysterious stranger, a man who claimed to have information about the night of the murder. The man handed Michael a folder thick with documents, photos, and letters. "This will clear your name," he whispered. "But be careful who you trust." The folder revealed a tangled web of corruption, lies, and cover-ups, involving people Michael never expected. Michael realized his journey was no longer just about his innocence, it was about exposing a broken system and those who profited from it. He was exhausted but determined. Every day was a battle, every step a risk. As the day of the final hearing approached, Michael prepared not just to defend himself, but to fight for the truth. Standing before the judge, he felt the weight of years lift slightly. He was no longer just a prisoner on death row, he was a man reclaiming his story. The climactic journey had only just begun. What would you do if your final wish led you into the fight of your life? Hit subscribe and leave a comment, because Michael's story is reaching a turning point. The day of the final hearing arrived, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. For nearly 2 decades, Michael Reed had lived with the crushing weight of a conviction that sentenced him to death. Now, standing in a packed courtroom filled with journalists, lawyers, and families, everything he had fought for came down to this moment. As Michael sat beside Sarah Mitchell, his lawyer and staunchest ally, he felt a strange mixture of anxiety and hope. Every detail of the case had been painstakingly reviewed. New evidence had emerged, evidence that could potentially overturn the conviction. But the system was still wary, and old prejudices hung heavily in the air. The hearing opened with the prosecution laying out their case. They questioned the credibility of the new evidence, tried to cast doubt on witnesses, and reminded the court of Michael's criminal past. Their words felt like old chains trying to bind him back into the darkness. Then it was Sarah's turn. Her voice was calm but passionate as she addressed the judge and jury. "Your Honor, we are not here to rewrite history or ignore mistakes. We are here because justice demands the truth, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable it may be. The DNA evidence we've uncovered clearly excludes Mr. Reed from having committed this crime. There is undeniable proof that the murder weapon belonged to someone else." She turned toward Michael. "Michael Reed has spent nearly 20 years behind bars for a crime he did not commit. This is not just a legal battle. It is a fight for human dignity." The courtroom was silent. Then the testimony of the mysterious witness, the man who had handed Michael the folder, was heard. He spoke cautiously, revealing a network of corruption and cover-ups, implicating a former detective who had rushed the investigation and suppressed crucial evidence. As the pieces fell into place, a wave of emotion swept through the courtroom. Michael sat frozen, heart pounding, as the judge reviewed the new findings. It was the emotional climax of his long, torturous journey. Outside the courtroom, reporters whispered about the possibility of a historic exoneration. Supporters held their breath. Opponents bristled with anger. Then, just as hope seemed within reach, a twist, an unexpected, heartbreaking turn. The judge announced a delay. The case needed further review. There would be no immediate release. Michael felt a crushing blow, as if the floor had dropped beneath him. But in that moment, something shifted inside him. The despair that had threatened to consume him over the years was met with a surge of resolve. This was no longer just about one man's fate, it was about shining a light on injustice. Michael stood before the judge and said, with a voice strong and steady despite the pain, "I will wait. I will fight. Because I know the truth is worth waiting for." His words echoed through the courtroom and into the hearts of everyone listening. That night, alone in his cell, Michael reflected on the long road behind him, the years of pain, loneliness, and fear. But also the moments of unexpected kindness, the letters from Jessica, the books about the stars, and the support that had kept him alive. He thought about Elon Musk's role, not just as a billionaire or innovator, but as someone who had sparked a new chance, a new beginning. And he realized that sometimes, the greatest strength comes not from the outcome, but from the courage to keep moving forward despite uncertainty. Michael wasn't just a man on death row anymore. He was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the unyielding search for justice. What would you do if faced with impossible odds but refused to give up? Hit subscribe and share your story in the comments. Because Michael's fight is far from over. Months passed after the emotional climax in the courtroom. Michael Reed's case was slowly gaining momentum, but the wheels of justice turned with agonizing slowness. Still, every day was a victory. The truth, once buried deep beneath layers of lies and corruption, was finally clawing its way into the light. The unexpected ally in this journey, Elon Musk, remained a constant force. He used his influence to push for transparency, applying public pressure on officials who tried to stall the case. Social media campaigns flooded with hashtags demanding justice for Michael, fueling a nationwide conversation about wrongful convictions and the failings of the justice system. Inside the prison, life was still challenging. The tension among inmates and guards hadn't entirely dissipated, but Michael's newfound hope changed how he carried himself. The man once resigned to his fate now walked with quiet dignity and strength. His transformation inspired some, while others remained skeptical. Jessica's letters continued to arrive regularly, filled with hope and encouragement. They reminded Michael of everything he was fighting for, not just for himself, but for his family, for love, and for the truth. Then, one chilly morning, Michael was called to meet with Sarah Mitchell. The look in her eyes told him something had changed. "Michael," she began, "The court has agreed to grant you a new trial." A wave of disbelief crashed over him. After all these years, the chance to finally prove his innocence in front of a jury was real. The new trial brought fresh challenges. Media attention peaked, public opinion was divided, and the prosecution prepared to fight fiercely to uphold the original verdict. But this time, Michael wasn't alone. He had a dedicated team, a growing army of supporters, and the truth firmly on his side. The trial was intense and emotionally charged. Witnesses were called to testify about the flaws in the original investigation. New forensic experts dismantled the old evidence. Michael's story, his pain, his hopes, and his resilience, touched many hearts. One pivotal moment came when the judge allowed the introduction of DNA evidence that conclusively excluded Michael as the perpetrator. The courtroom was stunned into silence. The jury deliberated for days. For Michael, each moment felt like an eternity. But finally, the verdict came. Not guilty. Michael's knees nearly buckled. Tears streamed down his face as he was overwhelmed with relief, gratitude, and disbelief. He was free. But freedom was only the beginning. Michael faced the daunting task of rebuilding his life, a life shattered by years behind bars. The scars ran deep, both physically and emotionally. Elon Musk reached out immediately after the verdict, offering support. "This isn't just your victory, Michael. It's a victory for everyone fighting for justice." Michael moved to a new city, supported by a foundation that helped wrongfully convicted people reintegrate into society. He met with therapists, found work, and slowly began to reconnect with the world. Throughout it all, one lesson remained clear: the fight for justice is never truly over. Michael also reconnected with Jessica in person for the first time since his conviction. Their reunion was emotional, full of tears and laughter, and the promise of new beginnings. Looking back, Michael reflected on everything he had endured: the pain of loss, the weight of false accusations, the uncertainty of hope. But he also realized something powerful: love, perseverance, and the courage to speak the truth could change even the darkest fate. Michael decided to become an advocate for criminal justice reform. He shared his story publicly, speaking at events and working with organizations to prevent others from suffering like he had. In an interview, he said, "I was lost in the system, forgotten by many. But if my story can help one person find hope, then every struggle was worth it." The journey had transformed him, from a man condemned to die, to a beacon of hope and change. As the sun set over the city, Michael stood quietly, thinking of all he had lost and all he still had to gain. Life is full of unexpected twists, he thought, but love and truth will always lead the way. What about you? What's one thing you've learned from your toughest moments? Hit subscribe and leave your story below. Because Michael's journey is a reminder that even when life seems darkest, hope can light the path forward. Before Michael Reed found himself trapped in the cold shadows of death row, he was just a kid growing up in a small Texas town called Liberty Falls, a place where everybody knew your name, and your family's history was impossible to ignore. Michael's childhood was a complicated tapestry woven with love, hardship, and a deep sense of community. His mother, Evelyn, worked double shifts as a nurse at the local hospital, while his father, James, was a factory worker who had fought in Vietnam. Together, they tried to provide the best for Michael and his two younger siblings, Lisa and David. Growing up, Michael was known as the kind-hearted boy who could always be found with a book in his hand or helping neighbors fix their fences. But beneath that gentle exterior was a restless spirit, struggling with the weight of expectation and the hardships life had thrown at his family. His father's return from war was marked by quiet struggles with PTSD. James was often distant, battling memories that no one could see but affected every interaction with his family. The tension sometimes erupted in bursts of anger or silence, leaving Evelyn to hold the household together. At school, Michael was bright but kept mostly to himself. Bullies targeted him because of his quiet nature and his family's financial struggles. Still, he found solace in his friendship with Jessica Carter, the daughter of the local pastor. Jessica was outgoing and fearless, the perfect balance to Michael's reserved nature. Their friendship blossomed into something deeper as they grew older, though life was never easy for either of them. The community of Liberty Falls was tight-knit but fraught with undercurrents of racial tension and economic disparity. As a young black man, Michael often faced subtle prejudice that complicated his path. Teachers underestimated him, law enforcement watched him more closely, and opportunities seemed just out of reach. Despite these challenges, Michael dreamed of becoming a lawyer, inspired by his mother's dedication to helping others and his own desire to fight injustice. He spent late nights studying, determined to rise above the circumstances. But the pressures were mounting. The local factory where his father worked was closing, and money was tight. Evelyn's health began to falter under the stress, and the family struggled to keep food on the table. One night, a turning point came. Michael's older cousin, Marcus, returned from prison after a brief sentence for a nonviolent offense. Marcus was charismatic but reckless, and his return stirred a mix of hope and anxiety in the family. Marcus pulled Michael into the wrong crowd, a world of drugs, petty crime, and dangerous choices. At first, Michael resisted, but the lure of belonging and escape from his struggles was strong. The fall was gradual but relentless. Michael began skipping school, falling behind in his studies, and drifting further from Jessica and his dreams. Then came the night that changed everything. Michael was accused of a crime he insisted he didn't commit, the murder of a local business owner. The evidence was circumstantial, the investigation rushed, and the community quick to judge. His family was torn apart by the scandal. Evelyn wept, unable to reconcile the son she knew with the accusations. James grew silent, retreating further into himself. Jessica, despite the heartbreak, never stopped believing in Michael's innocence. She became his fiercest advocate, visiting him in jail, writing letters, and fighting for his voice to be heard. Those early days in prison were the darkest. Michael wrestled with despair, loneliness, and the crushing weight of betrayal by the system he once dreamed of joining. Yet, through it all, the flicker of hope never died. Michael's story is one of contradictions, a boy full of promise caught in circumstances beyond his control, a man who lost everything yet refused to lose himself. It's a reminder that behind every headline, behind every conviction, is a human being with a past, a family, and a fight worth fighting. What part of Michael's story resonates with you? Hit subscribe and share your thoughts. This journey is about more than just one man, it's about all of us. After the shockwaves from the new evidence and Michael Reed's impending retrial, tensions escalated rapidly. The battle for his freedom was no longer a quiet legal struggle confined to courtrooms and prison cells, it had become a fierce clash of ideals, power, and public opinion. From the outset, the prosecution pushed back hard. The district attorney's office, led by the determined yet unyielding Richard Carson, refused to admit any mistakes. For them, Michael's conviction was a matter of pride and precedent. "We stand by our original verdict," Carson declared during a fiery press conference. "New evidence is not always new truth. We will fight to ensure justice is served." Behind closed doors, the pressure was even more intense. Sarah Mitchell and her legal team faced constant roadblocks, delayed evidence, missing files, and reluctant witnesses. It was clear some powerful figures wanted the case buried once and for all. Michael felt the weight of this invisible war every day. His prison cell, once a place of despair, had become a battlefield where hope and resistance coexisted. Meanwhile, media coverage reached a fever pitch. News outlets splintered into camps, some championed Michael as a symbol of a broken system demanding change, while others painted him as a criminal manipulating sympathy. Social media was a volatile arena. Supporters rallied with hashtags like #FreeMichaelReed and #JusticeForMichael, organizing online petitions and virtual vigils. At the same time, trolls and skeptics attacked relentlessly, questioning his character and the legitimacy of the new evidence. The public discourse mirrored the larger societal conflicts surrounding race, justice, and accountability. Amid this chaos, Michael found strength in unexpected places. One day, a letter arrived from a man named James "Jimmy" Hollis, a former detective who had worked on the original case. In it, Jimmy confessed that crucial evidence was suppressed, evidence that could have exonerated Michael years ago. He explained how internal politics and pressure from higher-ups had influenced the investigation, forcing him to close the case prematurely. This revelation added fuel to the fire. Sarah used Jimmy's testimony to file a motion demanding a thorough review of the original investigation and calling for accountability. But the response was swift and harsh. Prosecutors accused Jimmy of lying and undermining the integrity of law enforcement. The courtroom battles grew more heated, more personal. Michael, meanwhile, struggled with the emotional toll. Every step forward felt like wading through quicksand. Friends and allies were tested. The line between truth and politics blurred. Jessica remained his unwavering anchor, visiting as often as she could, reminding him why the fight mattered. "People want to believe in something bigger than themselves," she said one afternoon. "Your story gives them that. Don't let them silence you." And yet, the system's resistance was exhausting. At one point, Sarah was threatened with disbarment for challenging evidence handling procedures. Other lawyers on the case faced intimidation tactics. Michael's legal team pressed on, fueled by a shared conviction that the truth must prevail, no matter the cost. As the trial date drew closer, tensions peaked with a high-profile hearing in a packed courthouse. Testimonies clashed dramatically, witnesses recounted conflicting memories, experts debated forensic science, and emotions ran high. At one crucial moment, a juror fainted in the courtroom, overwhelmed by the intensity of the proceedings. Outside, protesters gathered, chanting for justice and demanding reform. Through it all, Michael remained focused. He knew the stakes were no longer just about him. The case had become a symbol, a call to examine the flaws of a system that too often sacrificed truth for convenience. Justice delayed is justice denied, he thought. One night, after a particularly grueling day, Michael sat alone and wrote in his journal. "This fight is bigger than me. I carry the hopes of so many who have been forgotten. I will not let them down." His words captured the essence of a struggle that was both deeply personal and profoundly universal. What would you do if the system was against you, but you refused to back down? Hit subscribe and leave a comment. Because Michael's fight is far from over. The wheels of justice had ground slowly for decades, but now they were beginning to turn faster, propelled by new revelations and relentless determination. Michael Reed's journey had taken an unexpected turn, one that would test every ounce of his courage and change the course of his life forever. After months of mounting legal battles and public pressure, Sarah Mitchell delivered news that would redefine everything. A whistleblower within the Texas Department of Criminal Justice had come forward, offering access to previously hidden surveillance footage and internal communications that exposed a web of corruption linked directly to Michael's wrongful conviction. This was more than just new evidence, it was a bombshell. The revelation forced a federal inquiry, and with it, the promise of a fresh start. For Michael, this marked the beginning of a grueling new chapter, a journey away from the sterile walls of prison toward a fragile hope of freedom and justice. The prison gates opened one chilly morning, not for release, but for a temporary transfer to a secure facility closer to the courthouse. Michael's heart raced as he felt the cold morning air on his face, a small taste of the outside world he had been robbed of for nearly 20 years. The journey to this new facility was tense and surreal. Guards moved silently, eyes alert, while reporters gathered outside, cameras flashing like lightning. For the first time in decades, Michael was more than a number, he was a man with a story that demanded to be told. Inside the new facility, Michael was introduced to a team of legal experts, forensic analysts, and investigators working tirelessly to piece together the truth. It felt like stepping onto a battlefield, but one where the odds had finally shifted. Among them was Dr. Rachel Abrams, a forensic scientist renowned for her work in overturning wrongful convictions. Rachel's dedication was palpable, and her meticulous examination of evidence brought to light discrepancies that shattered the prosecution's narrative. Together, Michael and Rachel pored over the case files late into the night. Each discovery was like lifting a veil, the hidden truths emerging from shadows. Outside the walls, Michael's supporters rallied. Social media campaigns went viral, documentaries and interviews aired, and public demonstrations demanded accountability. Yet, the journey was far from smooth. Opponents of the case attempted to discredit the new evidence, launching smear campaigns and legal maneuvers designed to stall progress. The pressure mounted on Michael and his team, and the emotional toll was heavy. But through it all, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. He found strength in small moments, a kind word from a fellow inmate, a letter from Jessica filled with hope, the quiet determination in Sarah's eyes. One night, alone in his cell, Michael wrote in his journal. "This is not just my story. It's the story of every person who has been silenced, overlooked, and forgotten. I walk this path not just for myself, but for all who deserve a second chance." The days that followed were filled with tense meetings, court hearings, and strategic planning. The narrative was shifting, slowly but surely. Michael's legal team filed motions to exclude tainted evidence, request new trials, and hold corrupt officials accountable. Then came the unexpected: a federal judge agreed to oversee the case, ensuring impartiality and fairness. For Michael, it was a breakthrough. The long nightmare was beginning to unravel, revealing a glimpse of light at the end of a very dark tunnel. The journey took Michael out of the confines of prison and into unfamiliar territory: public scrutiny, media attention, and the overwhelming complexity of fighting a powerful system. Every step forward was a battle, but Michael was no longer alone. The man who had once been resigned to death row was now a symbol of resilience, justice, and the unbreakable human spirit. If you were in Michael's shoes, facing impossible odds but with a sliver of hope, what would keep you moving forward? Hit subscribe and share your thoughts, because this journey is far from over. The courtroom was packed to capacity. The air was thick with anticipation, whispers buzzing like a storm gathering strength. Michael Reed sat at the defense table, his hands clenched tightly, heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. This moment, years in the making, was about to change everything. After nearly 2 decades of fighting a conviction built on lies, corruption, and silence, the final pieces of truth were finally coming together. The evidence presented today would either shatter the walls of injustice or bury Michael's hope forever. The prosecution's case began as expected. Stubborn, unyielding, pushing the narrative of guilt. But then came the defense's turn, and with it, a series of revelations that rocked the courtroom to its core. Dr. Rachel Abrams took the stand first. Calm, precise, and unwavering, she laid out her forensic analysis that dismantled the original evidence. DNA samples that had been ignored, witnesses whose testimonies had been coerced, timelines that didn't add up, every detail was meticulously exposed. Next, James "Jimmy" Hollis, the former detective turned whistleblower, testified about the suppression of key evidence and the pressure from superiors to close the case prematurely. His voice trembled with guilt and resolve, confessing how he had stayed silent for years but could no longer bear the weight of his conscience. The courtroom was silent, hanging on every word. Then came the most powerful moment. Jessica Carter, Michael's lifelong friend and unwavering supporter, took the stand. Her testimony was raw, emotional, and deeply personal. "I have known Michael Reed since we were children," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He is not the man the state tried to paint him as. He is kind, honest, and has been robbed of his life. I believe in his innocence with every part of my being." Her words moved many in the courtroom, even some who had doubted Michael's story. But it wasn't just testimony that shifted the tide, it was the video evidence, previously hidden, that showed a key witness fabricating parts of their story under pressure. As the footage played on the large screen, the prosecution's case crumbled piece by piece. Michael sat motionless, barely daring to breathe, as years of injustice were stripped away in front of him. The emotional weight of the moment was overwhelming. For the first time in years, Michael allowed himself to hope, truly hope, that he might walk free. But the road to justice was not without its final challenge. The prosecution, facing a devastating blow, attempted one last desperate maneuver, casting doubt on the credibility of the new evidence, accusing the defense team of tampering and deceit. The judge listened intently, weighing every argument with painstaking care. In a moment that seemed to stretch forever, the judge delivered the verdict. The court finds the original conviction to be unsafe and hereby orders a new trial. The room erupted, some with cheers, others with stunned silence. For Michael, it was both an end and a beginning. The fight was not yet over, but the scales of justice were finally tipping in his favor. Outside the courthouse, supporters gathered, chanting and celebrating the first major victory in a battle that had seemed impossible. Michael was led back to prison, but this time, his steps were lighter. He carried with him not just the hope of freedom, but a mission to ensure no one else suffered as he had. That night, alone in his cell, Michael reflected on the journey, the pain, the betrayal, but also the unwavering support and love that had sustained him. He wrote in his journal, "Truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of breaking free. I have learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. This is not just my story, it's a call for justice for all." His story was a powerful reminder: the fight for justice is never easy, but it is always worth it. What truths in your life have been waiting to be uncovered? Hit subscribe and share your story, because sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is speak our truth. The day Michael Reed walked out of the courthouse as a free man was unlike any other. The sun shone brighter, the air felt warmer, and the world seemed to hold its breath in quiet celebration. After nearly 2 decades behind bars, after endless battles in courtrooms and the shadows of doubt, Michael was finally free. The years of waiting, fighting, and hoping had culminated in this moment, a new beginning born from the ashes of injustice. But freedom was just the start. For Michael, the real journey was just beginning. He stepped into a world that had moved on without him, friends changed, families strained, and the neighborhood he once called home was barely recognizable. The weight of lost time pressed heavily, but so did the promise of a future he had never dared to imagine. Jessica was waiting for him outside the courthouse, her smile radiant, her eyes shining with tears. Their reunion was quiet but profound, a testament to the strength of friendship and faith. "Welcome back, Michael," she said softly. "You've been gone too long." Michael's family was more complicated. His mother Evelyn was frail but overjoyed, tears of relief streaming down her face. His father James, older and quieter, struggled to find words, the years of pain etched deeply in his gaze. Rebuilding those relationships would take time, patience, and forgiveness, but Michael was ready. The public attention did not fade with his release. Reporters, activists, and supporters followed every step, turning Michael into a symbol of the fight against wrongful convictions. He embraced the role with humility and determination. Speaking at rallies, joining advocacy groups, and sharing his story openly, Michael became a powerful voice for reform. Yet, healing was not linear. Nightmares haunted his sleep, memories of prison walls lingered, and the scars of lost years weighed heavily. Therapy sessions helped him confront trauma, while reconnecting with old friends provided grounding and hope. Michael also found solace in small joys, morning walks through the park, the taste of fresh food, and the simple freedom to breathe without fear. One afternoon, as he sat in his modest new apartment, Michael reflected on the lessons learned. He understood now more than ever that justice is fragile, and the fight to protect it never ends. He wrote in his journal, "Freedom is more than a word, it's a responsibility. To speak, to act, and to fight for those who still cannot." With the support of Jessica and Sarah, Michael began working with a nonprofit dedicated to exonerating the wrongfully convicted. His first-hand experience fueled his passion to make change. His story inspired others, men and women who had been forgotten by the system but refused to give up hope. The community rallied, bridging divides and raising awareness about the flaws in the justice system. Michael's journey from death row to freedom became a beacon of resilience and redemption. But perhaps the most profound change was within himself. Where once he felt broken and powerless, now there was strength and purpose. Where once he faced despair, now there was hope. As the sun set on that first day of freedom, Michael looked ahead. The road was long, and challenges remained. But for the first time in a lifetime, he believed in the possibility of healing, and of a better future. Life is full of unexpected turns, Michael thought, but love, courage, and truth will always lead the way. What does freedom mean to you? Hit subscribe and share your story, because every journey matters. Freedom, for Michael Reed, was both a blessing and a new battleground. The heavy doors of the prison had opened, but a new set of challenges awaited him in the world outside, a world that had moved on without him, where the fight for justice had only just begun. In the weeks following his release, Michael quickly realized that reclaiming his life would be far from easy. The scars of wrongful incarceration were deep, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and socially. Job prospects were scarce for someone with a criminal record, even one that was overturned. Old friends had moved on, and some family relationships remained strained. He faced a society that was eager to judge a man once labeled a criminal, struggling to see beyond the stigma of his past. But Michael was determined. The fire that had kept him going behind bars now fueled his resolve to build a new future, one where his story could inspire change and offer hope to others trapped in the system. Early on, Michael found himself crossing paths with unexpected allies. Individuals who believed in redemption and the power of second chances. One such ally was Marcus Green, a community organizer and former prisoner who had become a vocal advocate for criminal justice reform. Marcus had spent years navigating the same bureaucratic maze Michael now faced, and his knowledge proved invaluable. "You've got to fight for every inch," Marcus told Michael during their first meeting. "The system's not designed to help us, but together we can push back." Marcus introduced Michael to a network of activists, lawyers, and support groups dedicated to helping exonerees rebuild their lives. With their guidance, Michael began to explore opportunities for education, employment, and public speaking. At the same time, Michael partnered with Sarah Mitchell, whose legal work continued to pursue accountability for those responsible for his wrongful conviction. Together, they launched a campaign to expose systemic corruption and push for policy changes. But the road was not without obstacles. Powerful interests fought to maintain the status quo, launching smear campaigns against Michael and those supporting him. Media outlets questioned his credibility, and critics accused him of exploiting his story for personal gain. One particularly harsh article suggested that Michael's case was a rare fluke, undermining the broader movement for reform. Michael felt the sting of these attacks deeply but refused to be silenced. "I'm not just fighting for me," he told a packed room at a community center. "I'm fighting for everyone who's been forgotten, everyone who's been silenced. This is about justice for all." He began traveling across the country, sharing his story at rallies, universities, and legislative hearings. His voice, once muffled behind prison walls, now resonated loudly in rooms where decisions about justice were made. The emotional toll was heavy. Each retelling brought back painful memories, but also reaffirmed his commitment. Michael also faced personal challenges. The strain on his family relationships continued, especially with his father James, whose pride and pain created a barrier neither knew how to cross. Jessica remained his rock, helping him navigate these complexities with patience and unwavering support. Together, they dreamed of a future where Michael's experience would lead to lasting change. One day, a surprising figure emerged as an unexpected supporter, none other than Elon Musk. News spread quickly that Elon had reached out to Michael after reading about his case, moved by the injustice and eager to help in any way he could. The billionaire's involvement brought renewed attention and resources, giving Michael's cause a powerful boost. Elon's message was simple but profound: everyone deserves a chance at redemption. Let's make sure no one else suffers like this. With Elon's support, Michael's campaign gained momentum. They launched initiatives to fund legal assistance for wrongfully convicted individuals and invest in technology to improve evidence transparency. Michael marveled at how this unexpected alliance opened doors he never thought possible. But with greater visibility came greater scrutiny, and Michael had to learn to navigate the complexities of public life while staying true to his mission. Despite the challenges, Michael's resolve remained unshaken. He knew the fight was far from over, but with allies by his side and a community rallying behind him, hope was no longer just a dream, it was a growing reality. Michael Reed's newfound momentum was exhilarating. With Elon Musk's unexpected backing and the growing support from activists and the public, it seemed as if the tides were finally turning. But as any warrior knows, the greatest battles often come when victory feels just within reach. The path to justice was lined not only with allies but also with formidable resistance. The forces that had once imprisoned Michael, corrupt officials, entrenched bureaucracies, and vested interests, were now pushing back harder than ever. One morning, Michael received a call that shook him to his core. The legal team had uncovered evidence that the very prosecutors responsible for his conviction were actively trying to block new legislation aimed at reforming wrongful conviction cases. Emails leaked to the press revealed deliberate efforts to discredit witnesses, delay court proceedings, and manipulate public opinion. It was a dirty war waged behind closed doors, with innocent lives hanging in the balance. Michael realized that his fight was not just for himself but for countless others caught in a system designed to protect itself rather than the truth. The resistance manifested in more than just legal tactics. Michael and his supporters faced personal attacks. Threatening letters arrived at his doorstep. Online trolls spread misinformation, attempting to undermine his credibility. Despite the barrage, Michael's resolve only grew stronger. He leaned on his community, drawing strength from those who refused to let injustice stand. At a pivotal rally in Austin, Michael spoke with raw passion, "This is bigger than me. It's about a system that needs to be held accountable. We will not be silenced by fear or lies." His words ignited a wave of activism, drawing attention from lawmakers who began to listen. However, the resistance was not only external. Within the movement, cracks began to appear. Some allies questioned the strategy of aligning with high-profile figures like Elon Musk, fearing it could overshadow the grassroots voices. Michael faced the delicate task of balancing powerful support with authentic representation. The tension was palpable but ultimately strengthened the movement, forcing it to reflect and adapt. Meanwhile, Sarah Mitchell worked tirelessly behind the scenes, pushing for a groundbreaking bill that would establish a statewide commission to review wrongful convictions and provide compensation to exonerees. The bill faced fierce opposition in the legislature, with lobbyists from law enforcement groups warning it would undermine public safety. Michael knew the battle in the courtroom was nothing compared to the political war ahead. He spent countless hours testifying before committees, sharing his story not just as a victim but as a catalyst for change. "Justice delayed is justice denied," he told the lawmakers. "We must rebuild trust in a system that has too often failed the innocent." Public opinion began to shift as media outlets covered the legislative fight extensively, humanizing the faces behind the statistics. Still, the path was steep, and setbacks were inevitable. At one point, a key senator withdrew support, citing political pressure. The bill stalled, threatening to die quietly in committee. It was a dark moment, but Michael refused to give up. He organized grassroots campaigns, mobilizing supporters to flood legislators with calls and letters demanding action. Elon Musk used his platform to highlight the cause, drawing millions of views and donations. Slowly, momentum rebuilt. The bill passed the committee and moved to the floor for a full vote. On the day of the vote, Michael stood outside the Capitol building with hundreds of supporters, holding his breath. When the final tally came in, the bill passed by a narrow margin. Cheers erupted, tears flowed, and for a moment, victory felt real. Michael understood that the fight for justice was ongoing, a long, winding road filled with both hope and resistance. He reflected on how far he had come, from a condemned man on death row to a catalyst for reform. The journey was far from over, but Michael had found his purpose. What battles are you fighting that feel bigger than yourself? Hit subscribe and share your story, because hope and resistance are part of every journey. After the legislative victory that marked a milestone in the fight against wrongful convictions, Michael Reed knew the real work was just beginning. His journey had taken him from the claustrophobic walls of a prison cell to the spotlight of public advocacy, but now he faced a deeper, more personal challenge, confronting the ghosts of his past to build a future not defined by pain but by purpose. The years behind bars had left scars not only on Michael's body but etched deep into his soul. Prison wasn't just a place, it was a chapter filled with trauma, lost time, and broken relationships. To move forward, Michael realized he needed to revisit the moments that had shaped his nightmare, not to relive the pain, but to reclaim control over his narrative. His first step was a return to the small town where it all began. The place where the crime he was accused of happened, where people still whispered his name with suspicion, and where the shadows of injustice lingered. Driving through the quiet streets, Michael felt a mix of apprehension and resolve. The familiar sight stirred memories, the park bench where he and Jessica had spent lazy afternoons, the courthouse steps he had paced in despair, and the old diner where he once worked before his life was shattered. But the town had changed, too. New faces replaced old friends, shops shuttered and reopened, and a subtle undercurrent of hope seemed to pulse beneath the surface. Michael's visit was more than a physical journey, it was an emotional odyssey. He sought out those he had lost, family members, old acquaintances, even the prosecutor who had once condemned him. Some encounters were painful, reopening wounds that time had only partially healed. Others were surprising, filled with forgiveness and understanding. Jessica met him at the local cafe, her smile as warm as ever. "You're braver than I ever imagined," she said. "Coming back here takes strength." Together, they visited Michael's mother, Evelyn, whose frailty had grown but whose spirit remained unbroken. Tears flowed freely as they embraced, years of separation melting away in a moment of shared pain and love. Michael also sought answers about the man who had truly committed the crime, a shadowy figure whose name had been buried beneath layers of corruption and lies. Through tireless research and new leads, Michael uncovered fresh evidence pointing to the real culprit, a revelation that stunned even the most seasoned investigators. Armed with this knowledge, Michael worked with Sarah and the legal team to push for a formal reinvestigation. This wasn't just about clearing his name, it was about justice for the victim and the community. The reinvestigation brought Michael face to face with painful truths, the failures of the system, the complicity of those who prioritized winning over truth, and the human cost of such neglect. But it also revealed stories of courage, whistleblowers who risked their careers, community members who refused to forget, and activists who kept the fight alive. During a late-night meeting with Sarah, Michael reflected on the journey so far. "I never thought I'd be here again, fighting not just for myself but for everyone who's been wronged." Sarah nodded. "Your story has become a beacon. It's showing the world what's broken and what can be fixed." The journey was far from easy. Michael faced backlash from those who wanted the past to remain buried. Threats and intimidation followed, but he stood firm. The physical landscape of the town mirrored Michael's inner transformation, worn and scarred, yet resilient and ready to heal. His visits to the local schools, churches, and community centers became opportunities to share his story directly, fostering dialogue and understanding. He met young people who saw in him a symbol of hope and redemption, inspiring them to believe in the power of truth and justice. One afternoon, at a community gathering, Michael spoke passionately, "We cannot change the past, but we can choose what defines our future. We must stand together to ensure no one else endures what I did." His words resonated deeply, sparking renewed activism and a collective commitment to change. As Michael prepared to leave the town once more, he felt a profound sense of closure and possibility. The journey had been painful but necessary, a testament to the power of facing one's past to build a better tomorrow. Back in the city, Michael and Elon Musk met to discuss the next phase of their campaign, leveraging technology and innovation to prevent wrongful convictions on a broader scale. Elon's vision included AI-driven evidence analysis, improved forensic methods, and transparency tools designed to hold the justice system accountable. Michael was energized by the possibilities, knowing that the future he helped shape could spare others from his fate. His story was no longer just about survival, it was about transformation, impact, and hope. When was the last time you faced your past to create a better future? Hit subscribe and share your story, because every journey toward healing begins with courage. Michael Reed stood on the porch of his modest new home just outside Austin. The morning sun poured over the street, casting a golden hue across the lawn where children played and dogs barked in the distance. It was a quiet suburb, not much different from the one he'd grown up in, only now, he was stepping into it not as a boy with dreams, but as a man who had survived the impossible. Freedom hadn't brought immediate peace. After years of incarceration, Michael struggled with even the simplest of things: grocery shopping, keeping a schedule, sleeping through the night. The world outside had become digital, loud, fast. Sometimes too fast. Standing in the cereal aisle of a supermarket, overwhelmed by options, he'd once frozen for nearly 10 minutes. "You okay?" a young mother had asked him, her child tugging at her coat. Michael smiled, shaky but honest. "I'm learning." And learn he did. Brick by brick, step by step, Michael began rebuilding a life stolen from him. He enrolled in community college, eager to finish the education that had been ripped away. He chose sociology and criminal justice, not because he wanted to relive his trauma, but because he needed to understand the world that had wronged him. In class, younger students often looked to him in awe. At first, he didn't know how to respond. He wasn't trying to be a symbol, he was just trying to live. Jessica remained a grounding force. She helped him manage logistics, talked him through panic attacks, and reminded him, on the hard days, that he was more than his story. One evening, they sat together on the back porch, watching fireflies drift lazily in the air. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if that day had never happened?" Jessica asked gently. "All the time," Michael replied, staring at the stars. "But then I remember, if that day hadn't happened, I might not have found out who I really am." He wasn't just a survivor. He was an advocate, a speaker, a man who had been refined by fire and emerged with purpose. Still, not everything came easy. Michael's attempts to reconcile with his father had faltered. James Reed, though proud of his son's release, struggled to speak openly. A lifetime of emotional repression had turned their relationship into a maze of unspoken thoughts. On Father's Day, Michael drove 2 hours to visit James. They sat in silence for what felt like forever, watching a baseball game neither of them really followed. Finally, James broke the quiet. "I should have fought harder. I should have believed you louder." Michael, eyes burning, nodded. "I just needed you to see me." That conversation, raw and unfinished, became a turning point. They didn't hug. They didn't cry. But they showed up for each other, and that was enough, for now. Michael's career also began to evolve. With Sarah Mitchell's help, he took on a part-time role with a nonprofit aimed at reintegrating exonerees into society. He helped others find housing, secure work, and access therapy. His empathy and lived experience made him a trusted guide through the most fragile moments of others' transitions. One client, Darren, had been wrongfully imprisoned for 14 years. Paranoid and withdrawn, he barely spoke during their first meeting. "I know what it's like to not trust anyone," Michael told him. "But I'm here. I'm not leaving." Weeks passed. One day, Darren showed up with a sketch of Michael holding a lantern in the dark. "That's what you are," Darren said. A light. Michael had never cried so hard in his life. The public still followed his story. A documentary about his life, titled "In the Shadow of Justice," premiered at a local film festival. He almost didn't attend, afraid to watch himself relive the pain. But Jessica insisted. People need to see what strength looks like. In the final scene, footage showed Michael walking free, silhouetted against the rising sun. The crowd stood, applauding not just the film, but the man. After the screening, a young girl approached him, maybe 10 years old. Her voice was quiet, but her words were sharp. "My dad's in prison. He says he didn't do it. Your story gives me hope." Michael knelt to her level, tears welling. "Then we keep fighting. For him. For you. For all of us." That moment stayed with him long after. It reminded him why he couldn't give up, even when life still felt fragile. He started writing a book, part memoir, part call to action. Titled, Brick by Brick, Rebuilding After Injustice, it would share the intimate details of his journey and offer guidance to others facing the long road back. Through everything, the awards, the panels, the loneliness, and the moments of joy, Michael kept returning to one simple truth. Healing is not a destination. It's a practice. He didn't have all the answers. But he was showing up, every day, every hour, every breath, for the life he was determined to reclaim. And that, he realized, was enough. What would you rebuild, if given a second chance? Hit subscribe and share your story, because no matter how broken the pieces, healing begins one brick at a time. Michael Reed stood on the stage of a national conference on criminal justice reform. The lights illuminated his face, reflecting both determination and hope. Below him sat thousands of people, lawmakers, activists, and individuals who had been harmed by the very system meant to protect them. He wasn't just telling his own story. He was telling the story of thousands of innocent lives shattered by a justice system that too often got it wrong. Since being exonerated, Michael had become a symbol of resilience and reform. His story didn't just capture national attention, it ignited a movement. Organizations like the Innocence Project used his case as a springboard to push for legislative changes and support services for the wrongfully convicted. Michael became directly involved in shaping programs that provided vocational training, psychological counseling, and re-entry support for exonerees, people like him trying to rebuild after years lost behind bars. He wasn't just speaking at events. He was rolling up his sleeves, helping design the policies and tools others could use to find their footing again. Despite these achievements, Michael's path was still far from easy. With public recognition came scrutiny, and with advocacy came resistance. Conservative factions and those invested in the status quo pushed back hard against the reforms he supported. But Michael didn't falter. "We can't change the past," he said in a national TV interview, "but we can choose how we live in the future." His words became a rallying cry. They appeared on banners at rallies, printed on T-shirts, quoted in legislative hearings. They were repeated by parents to their children, by teachers in classrooms, by ministers from pulpits. One of Michael's greatest strengths was his ability to engage people at the grassroots. He wasn't an outsider lecturing from above, he was a bridge, connecting stories from the courtroom to those in living rooms and school halls. He organized community dialogues in neighborhoods that had long lost trust in the system. He visited high schools, telling young people about injustice not just as theory, but as lived experience. And people listened. As momentum grew, cities began creating independent conviction review units. States revisited laws on interrogations, eyewitness reliability, and DNA evidence. What started as a whisper became a movement. Internationally, Michael joined global conferences on justice reform, exchanging ideas with delegates from Canada, the UK, and Japan. The ripple had gone global. Looking back, Michael was proud, but not satisfied. He'd gone from a condemned man on death row to a respected national figure. But the mission was never just about redemption. It was about transformation, of himself, and of the system. His story was a catalyst, but he hoped it would be just one of many. He wanted others to come forward, to question, to speak, to demand. Michael was writing a book, advising on documentaries, mentoring exonerees. His schedule was full, but so was his heart. One day, maybe, the system would no longer need people like him to fight this hard for justice. That was the dream. Would you be willing to stand for justice, even when the road ahead is steep and uncertain? Share your story, because every voice raised, every small act of courage, creates waves of change. It was a cloudy Wednesday afternoon when the envelope arrived, plain, white, with no return address. Michael Reed nearly tossed it aside with the rest of the day's mail. Bills, a charity request, a flyer for lawn service. But something about the paper's weight stopped him. He turned it over in his hand. Thick. Hand-addressed. Ink smudged just slightly like someone had pressed too hard while writing. He slid a finger under the seal and unfolded the paper slowly. As he read, the air in the room thickened. His heart began to pound in that quiet, eerie rhythm that always came when the past tried to claw its way back. The letter was from someone he hadn't heard from in years, someone he didn't expect to hear from ever again. It was from Rachel Jennings, the sister of the victim in the case that had nearly killed him. Michael read the first line again and again. Michael, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve to write you. But I have something you need to know. He sat down slowly, the letter trembling in his hand. Rachel had been just 18 when her brother, Devon, was murdered. She had testified in court. Nervous, trembling, but certain. She had pointed at Michael across the courtroom and said, "That's him." That moment sealed his fate. But her letter told a different story. Rachel had lived with guilt for years. As an adult, she began to question what she'd been told. She started looking back at the investigation, the police pressure, the way detectives had fed her information. I was scared, she wrote. I wanted justice so badly I ignored the truth. The letter detailed how, over the years, Rachel had started digging, first out of curiosity, then desperation. She had discovered documents, audio tapes, and notes the defense never saw. Some of it had been sealed. Some quietly disappeared. But what she found now could reopen everything. Michael folded the letter and placed it on the table. He stared at it for a long time. That evening, he called Sarah Mitchell, his attorney and longtime ally. You need to read this, he said. Within 2 days, Sarah had driven from Dallas to meet with Rachel Jennings in person. What she returned with was nothing short of explosive, handwritten notes from the original lead detective admitting they had coached a key eyewitness, audio recordings of a suppressed interview with a man who had placed someone else at the crime scene, and an internal memo suggesting political pressure had been applied to get a quick conviction. It wasn't just a story of wrongful conviction anymore. It was a cover-up. Michael felt a sick mix of validation and fury. He had always known something was off, but seeing it laid bare, the manipulation, the lies, was gut-wrenching. And yet, it also opened a door. With this new evidence, Sarah began preparing a petition to have Michael's record not just expunged but reclassified as a wrongful and malicious prosecution. That distinction carried greater weight. It could trigger broader federal investigations, legal consequences for those involved, and systemic reviews of cases handled by the same officials. But Michael didn't stop there. He reached out to Rachel. At first, it was just an email. Then a call. Finally, they met. It was an awkward meeting. Tense. Silent at first. They sat at a small cafe on the east side of Austin, far from reporters and distractions. Michael ordered black coffee. Rachel barely touched her tea. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, breaking the silence. I don't know if I can, Michael admitted. But I think you did the right thing. That matters. They sat quietly after that. No dramatic declarations. No absolution. Just mutual understanding that the past didn't need to be undone, it needed to be exposed. In the weeks that followed, Michael and Sarah went public. They held a press conference. The new evidence was turned over to state and federal agencies. An independent investigation was launched into the conduct of the original prosecution team. The media storm was immediate. Headlines splashed across every major network. Exonere's case uncovers police misconduct. New evidence suggests cover-up in high-profile Texas conviction. Sister of victim comes forward with shocking truth. Michael used the moment not for revenge, but to refocus the narrative. "This isn't just about me," he said in an interview with NPR. "It's about a system that pressures victims, buries evidence, and punishes truth. It's about what happens when we prioritize conviction rates over justice." His words carried weight. Petitions began circulating. Public defenders received more funding in 3 counties. And most importantly, 5 other old cases tied to the same district attorney's office were reopened. Michael wasn't just changing laws. He was changing culture. In private moments, though, the weight of it all still pressed down. One night, as he sat on his porch, Jessica wrapped a blanket over his shoulders and sat beside him. "You okay?" she asked. "I should feel proud," he said. "But all I feel is tired." "You're still human," she said. "Even heroes get tired." He let the quiet comfort of her presence steady him. That night, he returned to the letter from Rachel. He framed it. Not as a trophy, but as a symbol. A reminder that truth, though delayed, had a way of finding light. Have you ever questioned the story you were told? Comment below. Share this. Because the truth doesn't just matter, it saves lives. In the years following his exoneration, Michael Reed transformed from a wrongfully convicted man into a powerful advocate for criminal justice reform. His journey was not just about reclaiming his own life but about ensuring that others would not suffer the same fate. Michael's newfound freedom came with a profound sense of responsibility. He understood that his case was not an isolated incident but part of a larger systemic issue. Determined to make a difference, he began speaking at schools, community centers, and legislative hearings, sharing his story to raise awareness about the flaws in the justice system. His testimony was compelling, not just because of the injustice he had suffered, but because of the grace and determination with which he carried himself. He spoke of the importance of due process, the dangers of coerced confessions, and the need for reform in eyewitness identification procedures. Recognizing that change required collective effort, Michael aligned himself with organizations dedicated to criminal justice reform. He worked closely with the Innocence Project, advocating for policies that would prevent wrongful convictions and support those who had been exonerated. Through these alliances, Michael helped push for legislative changes, including the implementation of post-conviction DNA testing and the establishment of compensation funds for the wrongfully convicted. His efforts contributed to the passage of laws that improved the fairness and transparency of the justice system. While Michael focused on systemic change, he also embarked on a personal journey of healing. He sought therapy to address the trauma of his wrongful conviction and imprisonment. Over time, he found solace in helping others who had been affected by the justice system. Michael's story became one of resilience and redemption. He authored a memoir detailing his experiences, which became a bestseller and further amplified his message of hope and justice. Michael Reed's journey illustrates the profound impact that one individual's story can have on a nation. His advocacy led to reforms that not only addressed the injustices he faced but also improved the justice system for future generations. His life became a testament to the power of truth, perseverance, and the belief that one person can indeed make a difference. After being exonerated, Michael Reed didn't just face the challenge of re-entering society, he had to confront deep emotional and psychological scars. Though he was free, he quickly realized that freedom wasn't just a physical state. It was a long journey of healing and finding a new purpose in life. Years of imprisonment had left more than just physical marks. Michael returned to a world that had moved on without him, new technologies, new social norms, and relationships that had either faded or disappeared entirely. He felt like a stranger in his own life. To adjust, Michael enrolled in support programs for formerly incarcerated individuals. There, he learned how to use modern technology, how to job hunt in a digital world, and how to slowly rebuild connections with family and friends. These programs didn't just help him reintegrate, they gave him an opportunity to help others going through the same process. Despite his physical freedom, Michael couldn't shake the psychological weight of the past. Anxiety, depression, and misplaced guilt often overwhelmed him. Memories of prison, of injustice, of days spent in isolation haunted him constantly. To cope, he began therapy. Slowly, he learned how to process the trauma, how to sit with pain rather than run from it, and how to forgive, not just the system, but also himself. It was not a quick or easy process, but over time, he found a sense of inner peace and clarity of purpose. Michael's mission didn't end with his freedom. In fact, it had just begun. He doubled down on his advocacy for the wrongfully convicted and for systemic reform. He worked closely with the Innocence Project, shared his story at universities, high schools, and government hearings, and pushed for policy reforms on everything from police practices to access to DNA testing. He became a voice for the voiceless, calling for legislative changes that would prevent wrongful convictions and support those trying to rebuild their lives after being exonerated. He focused especially on laws that mandated compensation for the wrongfully imprisoned and those that required better oversight of law enforcement. Michael's story became more than just his own. It was a catalyst. It gave strength to others who had suffered in silence and hope to families still fighting for justice. His life became proof that one person's courage can ignite a movement. He also helped other exonerees navigate the transition to life on the outside. He organized workshops, offered mentorship, and created a network of support for people still reeling from the trauma of incarceration. He believed in second chances, not just in theory, but in action. And it mattered. His efforts helped change minds, shift public perception, and influence how society treated those who had been wrongfully accused. Politicians began to listen. Journalists began to dig deeper. Families began to believe again. Despite everything he had achieved, Michael knew his journey wasn't over. The fight for justice, true justice, was ongoing. Every day, somewhere in America, someone was still being accused unfairly, convicted without cause, or abandoned by the very system meant to protect them. Michael kept going. He traveled across the country, continued speaking at events, advised on legislation, and even began helping produce a documentary that would highlight stories of wrongful conviction from across the nation. He wrote about it all, too. His memoir became a bestseller not because it was just a story of survival, but because it offered a roadmap for change. His words resonated with people, survivors, advocates, lawyers, and students alike. He wasn't just rebuilding his life. He was helping rebuild the system. Michael believed change started with the individual. Every small action, every brave voice, could contribute to a better, more humane justice system. Would you stand up for justice, even if the road ahead is uncertain? Share your story, because every small act of courage, every raised voice, can ripple into something bigger than you imagine. Michael Reed's exoneration was not the end of his journey, it was the beginning of a new chapter dedicated to justice reform and preventing wrongful convictions. He became a tireless advocate, using his experience to shed light on systemic issues and push for meaningful change. After his release, Michael immersed himself in understanding the flaws within the criminal justice system. He discovered that his case was not unique, many others had suffered due to coerced confessions, inadequate legal defense, and official misconduct. This realization fueled his determination to make a difference. He began collaborating with organizations like the Innocence Project, which works to exonerate the wrongfully convicted through DNA testing and reforming the criminal justice system. Together, they advocated for policies that would prevent wrongful convictions and support those who had been wrongfully imprisoned. One of Michael's primary focuses was legislative reform. He worked with lawmakers to introduce bills aimed at improving the fairness of the justice system. His efforts contributed to the passage of laws that mandated the recording of interrogations, improved access to DNA testing, and established compensation for the wrongfully convicted. Michael also pushed for the implementation of participatory defense, a community organizing model that empowers individuals and communities to actively participate in the defense of their loved ones facing criminal charges. This model seeks to transform the criminal justice system by enhancing the influence of essential stakeholders, individuals accused of crimes, their relatives, and their communities, in efforts to reform the system. Understanding the power of storytelling, Michael became a sought-after speaker, sharing his experience with audiences across the country. He spoke at schools, universities, and conferences, educating the public about the realities of wrongful convictions and the need for reform. His talks were not just about his personal story, they were calls to action. He encouraged individuals to get involved, to advocate for change, and to support policies that promote justice and fairness. Beyond legislative efforts, Michael dedicated time to supporting other wrongfully convicted individuals. He mentored exonerees, helping them navigate the challenges of reintegration into society. He also worked with legal teams to investigate cases of potential wrongful convictions, offering his insight and experience. His work extended internationally, as he collaborated with organizations in other countries to address issues of wrongful convictions and promote justice reform globally. Michael's advocacy had a profound impact. His efforts led to the exoneration of several individuals who had been wrongfully convicted. His work also inspired others to join the fight for justice reform. Communities began to see the importance of being involved in the defense of their loved ones, leading to a broader movement advocating for systemic change. As he continues his work, Michael remains focused on the goal of a fair and just criminal justice system. He believes that through continued advocacy, education, and legislative reform, meaningful change is possible. Michael's journey from a wrongfully convicted individual to a leading advocate for justice reform is a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of fighting for what is right. Michael Reed's exoneration was not the end of his journey, it was the beginning of a new chapter dedicated to justice reform and preventing wrongful convictions. He became a tireless advocate, using his experience to shed light on systemic issues and push for meaningful change. After his release, Michael immersed himself in understanding the flaws within the criminal justice system. He discovered that his case was not unique, many others had suffered due to coerced confessions, inadequate legal defense, and official misconduct. This realization fueled his determination to make a difference. He began collaborating with organizations like the Innocence Project, which works to exonerate the wrongfully convicted through DNA testing and reforming the criminal justice system. Together, they advocated for policies that would prevent wrongful convictions and support those who had been wrongfully imprisoned. One of Michael's primary focuses was legislative reform. He worked with lawmakers to introduce bills aimed at improving the fairness of the justice system. His efforts contributed to the passage of laws that mandated the recording of interrogations, improved access to DNA testing, and established compensation for the wrongfully convicted. Michael also pushed for the implementation of participatory defense, a community organizing model that empowers individuals and communities to actively participate in the defense of their loved ones facing criminal charges. This model seeks to transform the criminal justice system by enhancing the influence of essential stakeholders, individuals accused of crimes, their relatives, and their communities, in efforts to reform the system. Understanding the power of storytelling, Michael became a sought-after speaker, sharing his experience with audiences across the country. He spoke at schools, universities, and conferences, educating the public about the realities of wrongful convictions and the need for reform. His talks were not just about his personal story, they were calls to action. He encouraged individuals to get involved, to advocate for change, and to support policies that promote justice and fairness. Beyond legislative efforts, Michael dedicated time to supporting other wrongfully convicted individuals. He mentored exonerees, helping them navigate the challenges of reintegration into society. He also worked with legal teams to investigate cases of potential wrongful convictions, offering his insight and experience. His work extended internationally, as he collaborated with organizations in other countries to address issues of wrongful convictions and promote justice reform globally. Michael's advocacy had a profound impact. His efforts led to the exoneration of several individuals who had been wrongfully convicted. His work also inspired others to join the fight for justice reform. Communities began to see the importance of being involved in the defense of their loved ones, leading to a broader movement advocating for systemic change. As he continues his work, Michael remains focused on the goal of a fair and just criminal justice system. He believes that through continued advocacy, education, and legislative reform, meaningful change is possible. Michael's journey from a wrongfully convicted individual to a leading advocate for justice reform is a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of fighting for what is right. The journey toward rebuilding a life after wrongful imprisonment is never easy. For Michael Reed, it was a path filled with both challenge and hope, a chance not only to reclaim what was lost but to redefine who he was. The long years behind bars had taken a toll on his trust, his sense of safety, and his identity. But as the sun rose on this new chapter, Michael was determined to rebuild everything from the ground up. The first step was reconnecting with his family. Years of separation had strained relationships, some family members had drifted away, others were skeptical about how to relate to the man Michael had become. But through patience, honest conversations, and shared vulnerability, bridges slowly mended. Michael's mother, Linda, who had fought tirelessly for his release, was his greatest ally. Their bond, forged in hardship, grew stronger as they leaned on each other to heal. His sister, Jessica, came back into his life, cautiously at first, then with increasing warmth. The family dinners and quiet moments together became sacred rituals, small reminders that love could survive even the darkest storms. While rebuilding family ties was vital, Michael also needed to find a new purpose beyond survival. His advocacy work had given him a mission, but he knew that lasting change required more than words, it required tangible action and deep community involvement. Michael enrolled in a social work degree program at a local university. He wanted to understand systemic problems from multiple angles and develop the tools to help others more effectively. The academic environment was both challenging and invigorating. For the first time in years, Michael felt like he was moving forward, learning, and growing. At the university, Michael connected with fellow students and professors passionate about criminal justice reform. He became a mentor to young people who were at risk of falling through the cracks. His story resonated deeply. His experience became a beacon for those struggling with adversity. He also volunteered with local organizations that supported formerly incarcerated individuals. Michael led workshops on coping with trauma, navigating the job market, and rebuilding self-esteem. Watching others regain hope through his guidance gave him a renewed sense of purpose and joy. Despite progress, Michael's journey was far from smooth. There were days when old wounds resurfaced, memories of prison, moments of self-doubt, and encounters with stigma that reminded him of society's harsh judgment. One particularly difficult episode occurred during a job interview. The employer, despite Michael's qualifications, hesitated when he learned about his past incarceration. It was a painful reminder that freedom didn't always mean acceptance. Yet Michael refused to let these setbacks define him. Instead, he used them as fuel to keep pushing for systemic change and greater public awareness about the realities faced by exonerees. Recognizing that healing was not a solo journey, Michael helped establish a support group for exonerees in his city. The group met weekly, providing a safe space to share stories, offer advice, and encourage one another. Members of the group came from diverse backgrounds but shared a common goal: rebuilding their lives and reclaiming their dignity. Michael's leadership and empathy made the group a lifeline for many. The network also worked collaboratively with local nonprofits, legal aid organizations, and mental health professionals to create comprehensive resources tailored for exonerees. Michael's work highlighted the importance of community in recovery and reintegration. Social isolation had been one of the most damaging effects of wrongful imprisonment. Re-establishing a sense of belonging was critical to healing. Through community events, educational seminars, and advocacy rallies, Michael and his peers fostered connections with allies and supporters. These gatherings were not just about activism, they were celebrations of resilience, hope, and solidarity. Through therapy and introspection, Michael learned to forgive, not just others, but himself. He realized that carrying guilt for things beyond his control only prolonged his pain. Letting go was difficult, but it opened the door to freedom he had never fully experienced. He also discovered new hobbies, writing, painting, and hiking, that helped him reconnect with his inner self. These outlets allowed Michael to process emotions in healthy ways and brought moments of peace. Michael's vision extended far beyond his own life. He dreamed of a future where no one would suffer as he did, a world where justice was fair, compassion abundant, and mistakes corrected swiftly. He planned to continue his education, deepen his advocacy work, and write a book chronicling his journey. Most of all, he wanted to be a beacon of hope for those who still felt trapped in darkness. Michael's story reminds us that redemption is possible, even after the greatest hardships. It teaches us the value of resilience, the power of community, and the importance of fighting for justice. But it also challenges us to look inward. How do we treat those who have been marginalized or wronged? How can we help rebuild lives rather than tearing them down further? Michael's journey is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for renewal, and a call to action for a kinder, more just society. What does rebuilding mean to you? How do you find purpose after hardship? Share your thoughts. Your story might inspire someone else's new dawn. Michael Reed stood at a crossroads, both literally and figuratively. After years of battling injustice, rebuilding his life, and advocating for others, he found himself confronting something even more challenging than the courtroom or prison walls: forgiveness. Forgiving those who wronged him, forgiving a system that had failed, and ultimately forgiving himself. For years, anger had been Michael's shield. It was a natural response to the betrayal, false accusations, and lost years. The rage fueled his fight for freedom and reform. But once released, he realized that clinging to anger also trapped him in a cycle of pain and bitterness. Michael confessed in one of his public talks, "I carried that anger like a heavy stone in my chest. It kept me awake at night. It kept me from truly living." His honesty resonated with many who had faced trauma and injustice. One of the most pivotal moments in Michael's healing came when he began therapy with Dr. Karen Jacobs, a trauma specialist who had experience working with exonerees. Therapy was unfamiliar territory for Michael. He was used to physical battles, not emotional ones. Through months of counseling, Michael unpacked layers of pain, fear, and grief. He confronted memories that were long buried and learned tools to manage anxiety and depression. More importantly, he started exploring forgiveness, not as excusing wrongdoing but as releasing himself from the grip of hatred. Forgiving the criminal justice system felt impossible at first. Michael had suffered because of police misconduct, prosecutorial errors, and judicial negligence. These were not simple mistakes, they were systemic failures with real human consequences. But slowly, Michael's perspective shifted. He began to see that while the system was flawed, many individuals within it were also caught in a complex web. Some were trying to do their jobs, others unaware of the harm caused. Instead of blaming every part of the system, Michael focused on advocating for change, using his voice to push for accountability, transparency, and fairness. This proactive approach gave him a sense of empowerment. Michael's journey toward forgiveness extended to some of the individuals directly involved in his conviction. The detective whose coercion had led to a false confession, the prosecutor who pushed the case despite weak evidence, even the judge who had failed to catch critical errors. Forgiving these people didn't mean condoning their actions. It was an acknowledgement of their humanity, flaws, and possible ignorance. Michael recognized that forgiveness was a gift to himself, freeing him from bitterness. In a particularly moving moment, Michael reached out to the detective, now retired, to share his story and express forgiveness. The conversation was tense but healing. The retired detective admitted regrets and thanked Michael for his courage. Perhaps the hardest forgiveness was the one Michael had to give himself. For years, he carried guilt and shame for crimes he didn't commit, questioning how things might have been different if only he had acted differently. Therapy helped him understand that self-forgiveness was crucial for moving forward. I was a victim, not a villain, he realized. Accepting that he was not defined by a wrongful conviction became the cornerstone of his self-worth. Michael's story of forgiveness inspired many. At public speaking engagements, he emphasized that forgiveness was not weakness but strength, a way to reclaim control and peace. His message encouraged others caught in cycles of anger and trauma to consider forgiveness as a healing path. He also saw how forgiveness could bridge divides, foster dialogue, and open doors for restorative justice practices. Forgiveness did not mean complacency. Michael remained a fierce advocate for justice reform, but his approach became more nuanced and compassionate. He began working with organizations promoting restorative justice, a philosophy emphasizing repairing harm through reconciliation and community engagement rather than punishment alone. Michael helped develop programs where victims, offenders, and communities could engage in mediated conversations to promote healing and understanding. With forgiveness came new emotional freedom. Michael found joy in simple moments, laughing with friends, appreciating nature, and embracing opportunities without fear. He reconnected with his faith, finding comfort and guidance in spiritual practice. Meditation and mindfulness became daily habits, helping him maintain balance and resilience. In one of his most moving talks, Michael shared, "Forgiveness didn't erase what happened to me. It didn't erase the years lost or the pain endured. But it gave me back my life. It gave me hope that I could love again, myself, others, and the world." His words touched thousands, reminding everyone that healing is a journey, not a destination. Michael also emphasized that forgiveness is often a communal process. For those wrongfully convicted, families and communities also carry trauma. He encouraged creating spaces where all affected could heal together, sharing stories, offering support, and rebuilding trust. As Michael prepared to launch a new nonprofit focused on restorative justice and ex-injury support, he knew forgiveness would be at its heart. He believed that a justice system grounded in forgiveness and healing would be stronger, more humane, and ultimately more effective. Michael's journey to forgiveness shows that even in the darkest circumstances, light can break through. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing injustice, it means choosing peace over perpetual pain. His story invites us all to consider, what grudges might we hold that keep us chained? What healing awaits if we choose to forgive? Have you ever struggled with forgiveness? What helped you move forward? Share your experience and join the conversation. The past is never truly behind us. For Michael Reed, the shadows of wrongful imprisonment lingered long after his release. But instead of letting those shadows consume him, Michael chose to face them head-on. This chapter of his life was about confronting trauma, embracing vulnerability, and discovering the strength that comes from healing. Even years after his exoneration, Michael often found himself haunted by memories of prison, the cold cell walls, the echo of footsteps in empty corridors, the sting of isolation. Nightmares visited frequently, dragging him back into those dark days. At times, these memories felt unbearable. The trauma was not just physical confinement but emotional scars inflicted by years of injustice and loneliness. Michael struggled to reconcile his present with a past that refused to fade. Recognizing that he could no longer carry this burden alone, Michael sought help from Dr. Emily Saunders, a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma recovery. Together, they embarked on a journey of deep healing. Therapy sessions were intense and emotional. Michael faced painful memories he had long suppressed. But through guided techniques such as cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, he began to process trauma safely. A critical part of healing was reclaiming control over his own story. Michael learned to separate who he was from what happened to him. He reframed the narrative, from victim to survivor, from prisoner to advocate. He journaled his experiences, transforming pain into words that could educate and inspire. Writing became a powerful tool for self-expression and empowerment. Healing was not a solitary path. Michael's family remained a vital source of strength. Regular conversations with Linda and Jessica grounded him in love and acceptance. His support group for exonerees also became a sanctuary. Sharing struggles and victories with those who truly understood was comforting and validating. One of the hardest lessons Michael learned was to embrace vulnerability. Showing weakness felt risky after years of toughness in prison. But vulnerability became a bridge to connection. Michael began opening up in public forums, not just about injustice, but about his emotional struggles. His honesty fostered empathy and broke down stigma around mental health for formerly incarcerated individuals. Spiritual practice played a crucial role in Michael's healing. Meditation, prayer, and moments of quiet reflection offered solace amid turmoil. He found comfort in faith communities that welcomed him without judgment. Spirituality provided a framework for forgiveness, hope, and resilience. Michael also deepened his involvement in community advocacy. Helping others face their own trauma reinforced his own healing. He organized workshops on trauma-informed care and resilience building, educating law enforcement, social workers, and community leaders. Michael's story, shared widely through talks, articles, and interviews, became a catalyst for awareness and change. He emphasized that healing from trauma requires recognition, understanding, and support. Through storytelling, he humanized the faces behind wrongful convictions, challenging stereotypes. Healing from trauma is not a one-time event but a lifelong process. Michael accepted that some days would be harder than others, but with tools and support, he could navigate the waves. He committed to self-care and continuous growth, knowing that resilience is built over time. As Michael looked ahead, he envisioned expanding his nonprofit's programs to include mental health services specifically for exonerees. He dreamed of a world where no one facing wrongful conviction would have to suffer in silence, where healing was part of justice. Michael's journey teaches us that confronting pain and trauma head-on can lead to profound strength. Vulnerability is not weakness but courage. His story encourages us to seek help when needed, to lean on community, and to believe in the possibility of renewal. Have you faced a difficult past that still affects you today? What steps helped you heal? Your story might be the light someone else needs. The sun was rising over the city skyline as Michael Reed stood on the stage, ready to deliver the keynote speech at the annual Justice Reform Summit. This moment marked not only the culmination of a personal journey spanning years of hardship, resilience, and transformation. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope and possibility. Michael's voice carried a calm strength as he recounted the years behind bars, the fight for freedom, and the unexpected kindness that ultimately changed his fate. He spoke openly about the mistakes made by the system, the pain inflicted, and the scars that remained. Yet, his words were not weighed down by bitterness. Instead, they were full of hope, forgiveness, and a call to action. Justice is not just about punishment, Michael said, it's about healing, healing for victims, for the wrongly accused, and for society as a whole. Michael's story had become a beacon for thousands. From prison cells to university halls, from community centers to legislative offices, his voice inspired change. He reminded the audience that behind every statistic was a human being, someone deserving dignity, compassion, and a second chance. Under Michael's leadership, the nonprofit he helped create had grown into a powerful movement. It offered legal assistance, mental health support, and reintegration programs for exonerees across the country. The organization also worked closely with lawmakers to reform policies, reduce wrongful convictions, and promote restorative justice practices. Michael emphasized how forgiveness had been central to his healing, not as a way to forget injustice but to reclaim his life. He urged others to find their own paths to peace, whether through therapy, community, spirituality, or self-reflection. As a survivor, Michael understood the urgency of advocacy. He encouraged the audience to become allies. To speak up, educate themselves, and push for systemic change. Our voices together are stronger, he said. We can transform a broken system into one that truly serves justice. Michael's vision extended far beyond his own story. He dreamed of a justice system that prioritized truth, fairness, and rehabilitation. He envisioned communities where exonerees were welcomed, supported, and empowered to thrive. Toward the end of his speech, Michael shared a personal message: no matter how lost you feel, no matter how dark your circumstances seem, there is always hope. Your past does not define you. You have the power to create a new beginning. The audience erupted in applause, moved by the sincerity and resilience behind his words. Michael's journey was far from over. Every day brought new challenges and opportunities. But armed with forgiveness, community, and a renewed purpose, he faced the future with unwavering determination. His story is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome injustice, rebuild, and inspire change. As the summit closed, Michael invited everyone to join the movement, whether by volunteering, donating, sharing stories, or simply listening. Together, we can build a more just and compassionate world, he said. Let this be our legacy. The journey of Michael Reed, from death row to freedom, from despair to hope, is a powerful reminder: even in the darkest moments, a new dawn is possible. And sometimes, it takes just one act of kindness, one voice willing to listen, one person brave enough to forgive, to change everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?